Welcome to the King of the Court podcast with Ben Riggs and Ben Staten.
Welcome to the King of the Court podcast. I'm Ben Riggs. This is Ben Staten.
Yo.
Before we get into anything, though, I want to tell everybody thank you for subscribing to our podcast, wherever you get your podcast, for subscribing to us on YouTube. We've seen a big bump in viewership on YouTube, and we're very appreciative of it. So thank you for that. Please continue to engage with our videos and share them with your friends and family. Text them to your friends and family. Share them on your social media feeds. It's great.
Dedicated viewership, not people that comment on every video. It's been amazing. Thanks, y'all.
I'm not a media expert in terms of like the media industry and the way that ratings are tabulated, but people who are have, repeatedly said that a lot of this conversation about, the ratings dip that the NBA is experiencing is really overblown for two reasons. One is because the way people consume NBA content is very different. It is and isn't tabulated in those ratings. And two, and what they mean by that is being able to consume it digitally. And then two, so much of the NBA's audience is now international. And so with that, stating that the ratings dip is a little overblown, there is a ratings dip.
Yes. And a significant one, especially on ESPN, as we mentioned before.
Yeah. And I think there are a bunch of different reasons that, for example, when we talked about ESPN, we specifically talked about how particularly the halftime and pregame shows are really unbearable. Yeah, they're unbearable. Yeah. There's nothing fun or entertaining about them. There's nothing substantive about them. It's just Stephen A. Smith calling someone a coward, Kendrick Perkins talking about how you can't, pour honey on a biscuit and tell me it's a pancake or whatever. And like, it's just some weird country anecdote. And then, but then, so I think there's an element of, the production surrounding the NBA. And I think that that's evidenced by the fact that the NBA on ESPN is doing worse than the NBA on TNT. I also think there's an element of this where three-point shooting is a part of it. Like, it's just not a fun product to watch a bunch of people chunk a bunch of shots up that aren't going in. I will say this, if they're falling, I do think the three-point shot is exciting. So I think it's sort of it's a catch-22. And I don't know how much you can tax teams with the idea of making sure, like, they're out there to win games. And if they're not going to if it requires them to shoot a certain number of threes in order to win games, they're going to shoot them. So the 3-point thing is a little bit more complicated to me, but I actually think the biggest reason for the dip in the ratings has to do with the fact that the NBA has a superstar problem. And what I mean by the NBA has a superstar problem is that earlier I said that the NBA is actually, a significant chunk of their audience is international now. They have a large footprint in Europe, Asia, and an emerging footprint in Africa.
Yep.
I think that part of the reason for that is the emergence of these global superstars. Jokic, Luka, Giannis. I think these guys have such a massive footprint in Europe, Asia, and Africa. And I think that the ratings dip, which is happening domestically, is in large part owed to the fact that the two superstars that we have here in America are the same two superstars that we've had for decades.
And their teams kind of suck now.
Yeah. I mean,
that's the if LeBron was on a 65-win team and was a diminished LeBron, we did tons of narratives about how he's in the, you'd be able to make great narratives about how he's diminished, but he's leading the team and he's he's letting other stars thrive. But him and Curry are on shitty teams now. That's probably a little too harsh. But Golden State's a bad team.
I think it's too harsh about the Lakers. I don't think it's too harsh about the Golden State Warriors
tonight.
I don't think it's.
the Lakers are coming. They played okay, but they struggled to beat a Houston team that was missing Jabari Smith, Tari Eason. And like they like we're not talking about we're not talking about neither of them are title contenders. Put it that way.
Well,
Both of them are.
but
Yeah,
even then, my point would be like I don't even think that's the issue because like if you look at the Christmas Day ratings, those two guys did extremely well and they put on a good show.
yeah.
Like I think there's a little bit of for your casual average NBA fan. I think there is a little bit of LeBron and Steph are still amazing, but like, is there anything else?
Yeah, I
Like
think you're right.
I don't think it's so much like well Golden State sucks. Like I think it's just like do you have anything new to offer me? I've been to your restaurant 1,000 times. I love the
Well,
fried chicken,
it's not. We're
but
not
I've
going
eaten
on a
it for 20
decade.
years.
Yeah, we're going on a decade of these two monopolizing the NBA together, and both longer for much like a decade plus that for LeBron in particular. He a decade
I
before
mean,
that.
LeBron's 20 years.
The problem for the NBA is that we've been on this LeBron Steph rivalry for 10 years, and at this point they have not ceded the mantle.
Yeah, I would actually say like I agree with you completely in what you're saying. I think that the way I would frame it is this: it's not that they haven't seeded it. It's not their job to seed it. It's no American superstar has taken it from them. Because when you look at the international stars, the Lukas, the Jokic's, the Giannis's, they've done their job. They've become, and to a certain extent, Giannis has been able to do that domestically as well. But like, it's clear after a significant reign of Giannis as a dominant player, he's not taken hold as like a domestic American face of the league type player. And I think a lot of that has to do with they're looking for an American. The American audience is looking for that American superstar that they can grab a hold of. But Giannis, Jokic, and Luka have done amazing work in terms of carrying the mantle for the NBA internationally, China, Africa, Europe. Like the NBA has expanded their footprint in all those places, and they're doing fabulous in all those places. The problem is domestically, and I agree with you. Like Steph, LeBron, Christmas Day, it was great. Great show, great product, great ratings, all that stuff. But there is a little bit of fatigue with it. Like it's like it's give me something new. And no American player has said, LeBron, Steph, thank y'all so much for the game and what y'all have done for it, but this shit's mine now.
But they've been the face of the league since I was in college. Like I have two kids now.
Yeah.
I own a house.
100%.
This is it's just been a very long time, and I think one of the things that you were talking to me offline about was one of the biggest issue with the NBA is that the people the NBA has tried to position as the future face of the league have all been imploding spectacularly for about a decade now.
And I think there are three of them. I think there are three guys. I won't say quite yet that it's not fair to say Ant is imploding yet.
Starting to though, like this has been a weird week with him. We'll get
you're seeing warning signs.
Yeah.
You're seeing warning signs. But even just take the word imploding out as far as Ant's concerned, it doesn't even matter. Like with Giannis, I'm sorry, with Zion, imploding clearly works well. Let's start with Zion. Start with Zion and tell me why Zion in particular is a unique problem for the NBA.
Well, anyone who saw Zion at Duke, the hype that came out of it, every game you saw the amazing dunks, the best block shot probably in basketball history, the one where he blocks a 3-point shot and he gets to like seemingly at the top of the backboard, like the apex, he blocks the 3-point shot at its apex, the dunks, the face off with Taco Fall in the NCAA tournament. He came into the league as the most hyped prospect since LeBron, and he also had there was the comparisons. This was a 270-pound behemoth who jumped like LeBron James, jumped like Michael Jordan, had the body control of Charles Barkley, had the passing ability, had the shooting, had the charisma. Like he had that little kid energy. Like he was. No one had ever seen someone exactly like him. He had different parts of everything. The hype was everywhere. And since he's come in the league, it's just been a disaster. He's been hurt constantly. He has been out of shape. It's become a big issue on that front. He's more famous for this off-court pursuits with the issue, with the porn star that was chasing and the adult film actress, sorry, who's been chasing after him for having an affair with her. Like it's got nothing like egregious. Like these are all like in the grand scheme of things, these are all relatively minor, like minor transgressions, if if you want to call that a transgression. But it's just he's not serious enough to
His
be.
problem solely revolves around the fact that he's not on the court.
Yeah, he's not on the court. Yeah, and he's just clearly not mature enough to be the face of the league. Yeah,
Yeah.
like
I mean,
and like this
you're
maturity issue is going to come back with all three people we're dealing with. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I agree with you completely about that. I mean, with Zion, I think that the two players I've seen most hyped coming into the league are LeBron and Wemby.
Yes.
Below them two is Zion.
Yes.
Zion comes into the league with as much hype as anyone could hope to have. His on the court play matches the hype.
Yes.
The problem is he's not on the court much more than I am. The Pelicans have gotten me as a season ticket holder and Zion as a player have contributed to that organization about the same amount, it feels like. Like it's that bad for the NBA and for the Pelicans.
No, and there's been other he's just had there's just such a bizarre career. He made 4 3-pointers in his first game in the league and has made 31 total over the next 4 years. His game is clearly atrophied from its peak. Yeah, I mean there's the injury history, all this his rookie year. I don't know if people remember this, but the NBA was positioning him to be the face of the league. So the Pelicans got 30 national TV games, and he was hurt basically his entire rookie year. So the Pelicans were playing these national TV games where at their main star, they're just getting demolished. And they did the same thing the second year. They tried to do the same thing, and then as you see it now, it's just completely dropped off. Like the Pelicans, I don't believe had any. Did they have any national TV games this year?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I don't think they haven't had any of those. We're just. They've you can see that the NBA is essentially abandoned having him as a face of the league. And honestly, that's the right decision.
Yeah. I mean, even if you think about shoe contracts, Jordan, to put what Zion's expectations were, Jordan Brand has signature shoes with Luka and Tatum.
Yes.
And Zion.
Yes.
And it's hard to imagine Zion, renewing that deal simply because so much of the following that he has to have dissipated just because he's not relevant. He's not on the court. And that's been a major, major, major blow for the NBA because they're not able to feature him, as you pointed out, in the national TV games. They're not able to feature him in the way that you need to really keep fresh blood coming through and providing people with new superstar matchups. And if you're someone listening and you haven't really followed the history of the NBA, the history of the NBA is the history of its stars.
Yes.
Stars are the lifeblood of the NBA. And
the era where we have not had clear, dominant stars, hegemonic stars, have been the bad eras for the NBA.
Yes. And I think the reason you don't consider this a bad era is because you have international guys stepping in and filling that void in terms of actual on the court performance. But what an American audience wants is for American players to dominate that sport. And it's not just that Luka, Jokic, and Giannis, and quite frankly, I'll throw Shai in there too, although I think he's kind of sitting on the line. I mean, he's Canadian. But like these guys, I think are going to, I think Shai included, for a couple of different reasons, is going to have a hard time being seen as like a face of the league type figure. And we'll circle back to him and both him and Wemby in a little while. The next guy up who sort of got to the cusp of face of the league territory, and then I think the word implode is perfectly appropriate, is Ja Morant.
Yeah, and he had everything. He has the charisma. He has the ability. He's one of the greatest dunkers in NBA history, in game and externally. He had a fun team. He had everything going for him. He was a small. NBA loves tiny dudes. Like he's literally 6 feet tall, and the NBA. There was, I believe it was like 3 years ago now. The Grizzlies jumped out of the four. They were brash. They were young. They were fun. They were annoying everyone. But it was, it was the perfect recipe for, him to be the face of the league. And the league started positioning him. He started getting major brand deals. He got one with Powerade. He got his own shoe. And, his issue it's been injuries as well, but it's not been because they're not self-inflicted injuries, put it that way. They're not injuries due from lack of
No.
His issue is it became very clear that the stardom started to get he started to have issues grappling with the amount of stardom he was having. And everyone remembers, I'm not breaking news, but there was the two issues a couple of years ago where he proved unable to, he waved a gun shirtless at a strip club and an Instagram live video at 4 a.m, clearly looking drunk. And the NBA got cranked down hard on that. And he was suspended for 7 games and then was basically allowed back after saying that he'd gone to therapy, and then 48 hours later flew back and said that he'd done Reiki or something like that, and that fixed him. And the NBA was basically it really goofy, but basically slap on the hand, and the NBA was like, he's not going to do this again. And then a week later, he does the same thing. He starts waving.
It's almost immediately.
Yeah, immediately. And then the NBA suspended him for 25 games. It's look, man, we and there were other issues that came out at the same time. He was in the press for. He was hosting high schoolers at his house to play basketball games, and he just beat the crap out of one of the high schoolers because the high school threw the ball back at him hard, checking it. And his mom, he and his entourage got into trouble at a high school volleyball game for trying to fight an opposing parents. It was clear that the whole family was kind of spiraling. He was spiraling, and. It's been a couple years now, but rightfully so, the sponsors don't really have the same interest in him as they do before. His personality, he still seems pretty aggrieved.
Well, and even beyond the sponsors, I think that the NBA is a little more weary of him right now too.
Yes.
It's we've put our because Ja's performance on the court, Memphis's performance on the court, really when his star got to its highest is that same year they ran into LeBron and the Lakers in the playoffs. And, what sort of that was the year where Dylan Brooks was trash talking LeBron and calling him old and all that. And then they got a quick exit from the playoffs.
And honestly, there was universal jubilation when that happened because everyone grew so tired of the whole team's act.
Their antics. Yeah. There was an element
antics
of
is the best word. Yes.
Yeah, their antics got tiresome. But I'll say this: I don't think that was in any way a death knell for Ja or the Grizzlies. In fact, I think there's an element of it that it's not the same in its entirety, but there is some resemblance to sort of the youthful vigor that you get from the Oklahoma City Thunder right now that people really like. I think they like the guys who are there for all the smoke, and I don't think OKC is as chirpy as Memphis was. But with all that said, Ja's performance on the court that year, leading into the playoffs and all that, and even in some of the playoff games, he was outstanding.
Yes.
there's no reason for me to rehash all of the incidents that you enumerated a minute ago with Ja. I mean, I can just summarize all of it as a bunch of knuckleheaded bullshit.
Yes.
I'll throw out another instance in which his dad and Shannon Sharp got crossed courtside at a Lakers game. It's just a bunch of.
They were like on the court, like being separated by entourages. It was the dumbest thing I remember. The ESPN announcer was like, "This is the weirdest thing I've ever seen, like at an NBA game."
It's really bizarre, and like, to put it bluntly, it's just a bunch of immature bullshit that's unbecoming of someone who's reached the cusp of not just stardom, but face of the league level stardom, and is at the doorstep and has all of that for the taking. And it shows that his mental and emotional maturity is not up to snuff in order to inherit that that privilege, because that's what it is. And the NBA becomes wary
This is a
of
privilege that comes with hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yes, and I think that and legacy and fame and a lot of other things, but I also think there is an element with Ja too, where when you couple like the injuries in and of themselves, I don't think are damning, and I don't think that in and of themselves those injuries threaten that level of stardom for him. Injuries are part of competitive sports. But I will say this, when you couple those injuries with all of those incidents, it amplifies those injuries and makes them even more problematic because it's more time with him not on the court. And then when you take into account the cause of those injuries, like you said, it's not like with Zion. Zion's not out of games due to blunt impact injuries. If there's blunt impact involving Zion, most likely whoever was in
impact,
whoever was on the other end of the blunt impact is out of the game due to the injury. With Ja, he's so slight of frame, so small in stature, that his style of play, which is above the rim, incredibly fast, hyper aggressive, there are questions about whether or not it's sustainable over the course of an 82 game season, year in and year out, for a face of the league level player.
100%.
And you see it with his current injury, where he's just trying. It's not even style of play in that case. It's him trying to get over a screen and running into Daniel Tice and having the AC joint in the shoulder sprain, missing several games as a result of that.
I mean, there's just to sum it up, it is looking right now like he may be just too brittle to be to consistently play in the NBA. Like,
well, or
might be playing
the bare minimum, and more relevant to this discussion, too small a stature, too brittle to play the style of play that merits face of the league level stardom.
Absolutely.
I think now that's a good transition to another guy who has a similar style of play, or at least used to Ja Morant, but isn't as slight a frame. And actually,
in fact, he's built like an NFL running back. Yeah.
Yeah, he actually walks the line between Ja and Zion very well. He is a guy who is in excellent shape, much bigger, much stronger than Ja, but not overweight and out of shape like Zion. And that's Anthony Edwards. And Anthony Edwards somehow last year, in the process of aspiring to face of the league status, simultaneously circumvented the face of the league conversation and entered into MJ 2.0 discussions, which was bizarre and unwarranted. But this year...
But also a sign of how desperate the league and the media was to have a new face of the league.
I agree with you about that. I think if you're looking for evidence that the point that I was making earlier, that the NBA has an American face of the league problem, it shows you how desperate they are to find that person. The MJ 2.0 conversation, how desperate they were to find that person. I agree with you completely about that. It is, if we were trying this case in a court of law, this would be Exhibit A.
And they were doing like wild stuff, like putting up his stats, which was like 26 points a game next to Jordan's like 36 points a game. Like, see, they're the same thing. And I was like, these stats look nothing alike. Yeah.
Oh, and when
Yeah.
when when they swept KD and the Suns in the playoffs last year,
Oh yeah.
he was vaulted to right there next to Jordan as an elite playoff performer. And then when they beat Jokic, which to their credit, like that was an actual accomplishment.
That is a legitimate, amazing victory for
Yeah. Yeah. So, but then you tough exit from the playoffs last year against Dallas in the finals.
Kind of gets like exposed for lack of playmaking, which is fine. He's 22, 23. Like, but like clearly.
No, that's what I was about to say. Is like you're exposed, and not only are you exposed, but sort of your chirping and kind of calling out Kyrie publicly kind of drew some attention to it all because there was a lot of anticipation surrounding it. So you got the spotlight on you for it, and then him and Luka just eradicate you. But once again, this isn't a damning thing. 22 years old, time to grow. Like you're in a Western Conference Finals at 22 years old, major accomplishment. It's a sign that you're heading in the right direction.
Yeah.
Then your team takes your running mate and trades him, gets rid of Karl Anthony Towns, sends him to New York. It's one thing to trade your running mate in what you believe will be an upgrade. But I'll say you and me were both on this from day one. Julius Randle for Karl Anthony Towns is not a lateral move.
Oh no, the conversation on that move was insane. First off, people were saying like Dante DiVincenzo was the deciding factor moving that move. He's averaging like 9 points a game. Randall has been anyone who's actually watched Randall play knew exactly how this was going to roll out.
Yeah.
And this is exactly what you could expect. And the team is toxic. There's the spacing.
Well, but that's what I was about to say. Is like even beyond any type of toxicity or locker room thing. Like the problem is Anthony Edwards had a particular style of play that Cat helped facilitate by spacing the floor, and Julius Randle and the spacing that they have with Randle on the floor has completely clogged up the lane. And Anthony Edwards, who was in the conversation for face of the league because of his style of play, is now being relegated to a perimeter shooter.
It's even more bizarre than that. Like you had a dude who was playing like Michael Jordan and getting harkened Michael Jordan, came back this year, started playing like Klay Thompson. Like it was, it's a very bizarre situation. Part of it's due to the spacing, part of it's due to him clearly prioritizing
Some of it's clearly due to what Chris Finch wants to try to do.
Yeah. But it has been a legitimate disaster all around. And to compound matters, Ant has clearly slowly been going off the rails this year. I mean, he's starting to give these like press conferences at his locker where he just like waxes whimsically about like the league and what he misses about things. And begin like a month ago where he was talking about how like the team isn't tough. And then, like the one that was really weird was like earlier this past week, he waxed about how he doesn't like being double teamed because he doesn't he feels like he has to pass in those situations, but what he wants to do is he wants to score because he's 23 years old and any 23-year-old wants to score, and he's like saying these things next to his teammates, and it's like, buddy, you realize that like you're saying you don't like having to play professional basketball next to them,
and even more to the point, what you're doing is like, yes, we understand you want to score.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, like most first options on a team like to score.
Yeah.
And opposing teams are going to try to prevent you from scoring because one of the fundamental premises of basketball is that if you have more points than us at the end of the game, we lose. So we're going to try to prevent you from scoring. And you're telling other teams, if you want to frustrate me and take me out of the game, double team me.
No, it was wildly out of line for a person who wants to be a leader of a team to say. And then he came out the next game, took 31 shots, scored 50 points on 31 shots, including some of the most wild shots you'll ever see. Like he did a Kareem skyhook at the end of the game that went like flying, like it was like playing hero ball. Like the vibes on that team his teammates look like.
And just
they
real
hate him.
quick to put that game into context, he had 51 points, but they lost that game to Detroit.
Yeah.
And this is a Detroit team without Jaden Ivey.
Without Jaden Ivey, he including fouls, he took over 40 shots. It was the vibes, the his teammates looked dejected and done with him. There was the chemistry at the beginning of the year was Randall. That seems to have become now Randall and Ant. Like that team is, falling apart at the seams, and I think is heading towards a spectacular blow up later this year.
Yeah, and I mean with Ant, like to me here, like with Zion, it's injuries, and it's injuries due to what seems apparent, lack of fitness and maturity and personal responsibility and understanding what it means to be a professional. With Ja, it seems to be mental and emotional immaturity, also along with his sort of brittle frame and his style of play leading to more injuries.
Yeah.
And then with Ant, the problem is just purely on the court. Like in a year where you would have expected him to really, I honestly thought that this year he would be coordinated as face of the league, and
the NBA
was
expecting that. The NBA,
and he was set up for it. He was set up for it, and then
the Olympics run, there was everything set up for him.
Yep, and I think that for starters, I think that the Minnesota front office sabotaged that whole thing.
Yeah.
Sabotage might be the wrong word because I don't think they intended to do it, but they certainly made a move that changed the dynamic on the offensive end of the floor.
These idiots detonated their own team. You can say whatever you want. Like, there's a whole talk about whether this is the ownership or not. Well, like, first off, no one knows who the fucking owner of that team is because the owner, like, there's two groups fighting for control of the franchise. But this is in 3 off seasons they've made these spectacularly bizarre, like, major trade move. First, getting Rudy Gobert, and then trading away Cat. After getting to the Western Conference Finals, and look, the reality is, it turned out Cat's was the best player on that team. We just didn't know it because he had sublimated himself to Ant, and they took off the best player on this team, and the team's a lot shittier now. That's just the way it is.
So, I mean, I think we both agree that the NBA does have a star problem domestically, and that the stopgap for that star problem is the same two stars in their rivalry that we've had for the better part of a decade, more than a decade, in Steph and LeBron. And we also agree that it's not that fans don't want to see those people and that they can't put on a good show. It's that we just want something new. Yes. And that the Luka, Giannis's, and Jokic's of the world are not going to solve that problem because what the American audience wants is an American to step up and take that mantle from Steph and LeBron.
Well, I will say this. I think that there is an element of that, clearly, that I want that. But I also think that there's a marketing mistake here. It is not like there is not evidence of Americans embracing international stars in other sports. When you have Americans, they don't watch Christian Pulisic over Lionel Messi more than that. Like, they embrace Messi. You can see that in Miami.
Don't you think that's a little bit different than that soccer is just inherently in an international game?
I think to some extent, but I also think that we've done it they've done a very poor job of marketing these stars, and I think that we're starting. I think that it's been compounded by the fact that I think Jokic and Doncic are incredibly disinterested in becoming faces of the league and national stars in the United States.
I agree with that.
And so and they have and Giannis has been interested, but. And you've seen the benefits of that. Like, he is a major name. Like, you mentioned Giannis to people, like that name will like that. And I do think that you could, I think you really could see Wemby become the face of the league.
I think there are two names we need to talk about, but there are a couple of others that I think need to be addressed. One of them is in terms of solving this problem. There's one American. And that could potentially come to mind, is like a great player on a great team in a major media market, and that's Jalen Brunson. He's tough. He's rugged. He plays hard. My thoughts on and he's in New York.
Yes.
My thoughts on Brunson. Tell me if you think I'm wrong. His style of play is never going to earn him the mantle of face of the league.
Yeah, he's point guard Tim Duncan. And there's benefits to that. It's great fundamental. I think he has the charisma for it. But I think his style of play is a little too boring for it. I also think that and I don't think that there's just never been a track record of a player in New York City or the New York Knicks being the face of the league. And this dates back. I mean, like this has been true through the history of the NBA. Patrick Ewing wasn't. I mean, he was a major player in the league, but he wasn't.
But he also shared time. Like he overlapped so much with Jordan.
But even when Jordan was out, it wasn't like Patrick Ewing was the face of the NBA. You know, he
No.
got to the finals in that year. He was like he's part of a major team. Bernard King wasn't the face of the league in the '80s. Willis Reed wasn't the face of the league in the '70s. Like there are major players there, but there's just not a track record. I think like you can debate, correlation and causation in terms of like whether that's like because of New York or just like they weren't the face of the league, for other reasons. But I think that like there's just not a lot. There's also like not a track record of tiny point guards who aren't like super explosive being faces of the league. This has never been
That to me is the thing that damns Jalen Brunson is that the guy who's going to drive into the lane and hit you with his shoulder, turn, pivot, pump fake, step through, layup, and one. Like that's like
pivot,
basketball aficionados.
Oh, I love it.
Love it. Love it. Love Jalen Brunson. We'll watch him every time I can catch a game. Honestly, love the Knicks. But it's not face of the league style play. And with that said, I did not think I was going to get much argument from you out of the Jalen Brunson one. I thought we were going to be on the same page with that. I don't think New York is prohibitive. I actually think it would be an advantage. I just think
I would agree with you on that.
But the other player who has a similar-ish style, far less rugged and far smoother, and quite frankly, far more effective, is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I think you could mention that, well, Shai is not American, though, and he's Canadian. I don't think being Canadian is going to be prohibitive in this space. And the main reason I think that is if you watch a Luka or a Jokic game or a Giannis game,
yes,
and you're watching the post-game interview with them, if for some reason you couldn't surmise from the names Giannis Antetokounmpo or Luka Doncic or Nikola Jokic that these guys weren't from America, as soon as you catch their post-game interview, all confusion about that evaporates. Their accent is very thick. When you watch a post-game interview with Shai, that's not the case. You can detect a Canadian accent, but I don't think it's any problem for him winning face of the league honors. I think the problem for Shai is, once again, his style of play, while not exactly like Jalen Brunson's, it's very similar.
It's aesthetically beautiful.
Beautiful.
But it's not above the rim. It's not
smooth.
Yeah, he is one of the smoothest, most beautiful players to watch. Like in terms of like sheer like polish and like finesse and even like even like just creativity. Honestly, like he's like he's so slippery and like plays so herky jerky. But again, like the guards who have broken through. No, the one of the differences, the one name you could mention is Allen Iverson is probably the exception for this. He wasn't like dunking on people.
But you're talking about a cultural icon with Allen Iverson.
Yeah. But the guards that have broken through tended to be those who were above the rim type of players, the explosive guards. And I think, now you can talk about Jordan, like, his master in the mid range. Obviously, Jordan and Kobe were both mastered the mid range.
Same with Kobe, yeah.
But they became more famous because of their above the rim exploits, and then they transitioned to that later in their career.
I'll just say this: it's not a fadeaway jump shot that is the logo on the Jordan Brand shoe.
Yes, that's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like,
And
I would love it if he became the face of the league. Quite honestly, I think that would be
Shai is a player that you would love.
yeah.
You would love, kids to emulate and all that stuff. Like he's incredibly efficient, like fundamentally sound, and has as smooth a handle as anyone you've ever seen, except for maybe Kyrie Irving. But to me, it's the if you don't have the element of playing above the rim, it's just prohibitive when it comes to face of the league type stardom, because what Americans are looking for, and I actually think this is a problem in terms of youth basketball development in the United States.
Yeah.
What Americans are looking for are the Avengers-esque level athleticism.
Yes.
That's what they want. They want the guy who can literally take off from the free throw line. Like when you go back and you watch LeBron,
Or the person who's going to hit the wild and incredible shots, the Steph Curry shots.
yes.
Never before seen shots. Yeah.
Yes. Well, that's why I say, like, 3-point shooting is not inherently the problem.
No.
Missing 3-point shots is inherently the problem.
No. And like, and the thing about Steph Curry, and this is the thing, like he makes the most incredibly difficult shots, but he makes them so consistently they're great to watch. If like anyone else taking those shots, they're bad shots. And people don't want to watch bad shots. They want to watch
100%. 100%. Well, I mean, even to the point where, like, Steph has 1,000 games that kids would get more excited to watch highlights from than Klay Thompson's record-breaking game where he had like 11 dribbles.
Yes.
Because it's what Steph is doing is just inherently more exciting.
Yes.
He's creating. He's not just shooting wild shots.
And his showmanship that he
100%. 100%.
The energy, the happiness.
100%. He has the showmanship. And so, like, I think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has all the talent you would need. To be quite honest with you, of the three people we mentioned earlier, that
by far the most talented.
Yes, the three Americans that we mentioned earlier that could have claimed the mantle of face of the league, Zion, Ant, and Ja. It's inarguable.
Yes.
That Shai is more talented than all of them.
Yes.
Every one of those guys, if they
Ant even agrees. He said Shai's the best player in the league.
Yeah. If you were to eradicate whatever problem each of those three guys had, they would claim the face of the league title over Shai in a heartbeat.
Yes.
So when we talk about guys who could potentially claim this mantle, there are two names left. I actually wrote down Cat. And real quick, if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, this is just more anti-OKC bullshit where they're disqualifying Shai from this because he shoots in the mid-range, I'll just say this. Kevin Durant was never face of the league. Yeah. Kevin Durant has achieved more than anybody could hope to achieve in the NBA. Is arguable, like there are people out there, credible people, who will say that Kevin Durant is the best pure scorer in NBA history. And Kevin Durant was never face of the league. It's just, and he has more of an above the rim game than Shai does.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen for somebody who operates 70% of the time in the mid range and lacks the explosive above the rim game.
People want to see someone that makes them go, ooh, ah. Yeah, it's partly why Tim Duncan never hit off. That and he had
100%.
Tim Duncan, if you make something look so efficient and even honestly relatively easy, it takes away the ooh and ah and like the element of like the starstruck element of it. And like that, and like part of what Shai makes basketball look so easy, he makes really difficult plays look really easy, and he just pulls up for jump shots and like with like body control and angling and like dribbling, but it it doesn't make your jaw drop. Put it that way. Now he does.
No,
Do
I
some
agree.
stuff
I
with
agree
his
with you. In fact, I think like the interesting comp where you like can make another differentiation is I'm saying that Luka has done that internationally. I agree with you. Like one of the reasons that you can't be entirely sure that someone like Luka couldn't do it in America is because you're never going to find out because Luka's not interested in it. But with Luka, one of the big differences between him and Shai is there is an element to their game where they both look like they're doing this very easily.
Yes.
But Luka has another element to his game where he just looks like a maniac. Think him like I guarantee you one of the most viewed clips, top 2 or 3 most viewed clips from the NBA last year is the shot Luka hit over Rudy.
Yes.
And the shot's amazing. It's kind of Steph Curry-ish in that it's a clutch 3 in a critical moment, step back bomb. But it's also memorable because of what he did to Rudy after he shot it.
Yeah.
Shai doesn't have that element to his personality.
Yeah.
That's not to say Shai is not a gamer. I think he is. I'm just saying Shai is not as vocal and as antagonistic as Luka is with the trash talk.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Now there are 2 other players that we need to discuss. One of them is a damn conundrum to me as to why he's not face of the league. And that's Jason Tatum. The other is Victor Wembanyama. And that's not a conundrum. He's just young, and the question is really so. There are 2 questions. Why isn't let's do this one first. Why isn't Jason Tatum face of the league?
I think people decided there was like it became cool to think that he was overrated and that he is not necessarily the most compelling personality. I there's not really an easy explanation besides people just didn't find him cool. Like that's kind of what it comes down to. He and I think the transition from Duke to Boston Celtics, like teams that people have liked to hate, put it that way, didn't help that. I think that there's a lot of media members who don't like Boston for whatever reason. I think there's definitely a lot of media members who don't like Duke. I think but um, there's and then there's this sense that like Boston's success has not been deserving. Like there is a tendency by the media and fans alike to try to create narratives to downplay his accomplishments at every turn. Whether that's like when he said last year at one point, like I believe I should be in the MVP discussion, which you can agree or disagree with in the merits, but it's just like you hear a bunch of players say that all the time, like and that like that got him pilloried for days. This year, in the playoffs, he won the NBA title, and he even said like like they're gonna have to respect us now. Like the entire from even before the playoffs, there was like ESPN trying to like create dissension in the Celtics locker room by saying, "Is this Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum's team or whatever?" And like the discussion afterwards is Jaylen Brown actually better than Jason Tatum? I don't think the media has ever tried to like portray him that way, and I think that they he just he's not cool enough. I guess is the best way to say it. They just don't view him as cool enough.
Yeah, I think that's a fair summary of it. I think you could just summarize it as saying they don't think he's cool enough. It's actually bizarre to me though, because I think they screwed the pooch because I think what the media tried to do was generate a narrative that Anthony Edwards was MJ 2.0 and shove him into the face of the league role because they saw that. They saw his personality and his style of play
More marketable.
as more exciting, more marketable. They enjoyed the narrative more because he was younger, so on and so forth. Came from Georgia to Minnesota rather than Duke to Boston. And I think what ended up happening was they in the competition for face of the league, they tried to drive the death knell into Jason Tatum by shitting on him, claiming that Jaylen Brown was a better player. I think you're 100% right. It's just bizarre that the media had always realized and talked about the Celtics as though Jaylen Brown was the best player. The statistics backed up the idea that Jaylen Brown. I'm sorry, I got that backwards. Let me back up. The media had always talked about the Boston Celtics as though Jason Tatum was the best player. The stats proved that Jason Tatum was the best player. The eye test showed you that Jason Tatum was the best player. And then suddenly it becomes this competition for face of the league, and the media goes all in on Ant and then, tries to shit on Jason Tatum. I do think there is an element where the league, which I think plays a critical role in things like who's going to be featured on the, stuff like the Starting Five Netflix documentary.
Yeah.
I do think it's worth noting that they put both of those guys on there.
Yes.
And maybe this is Jason Tatum's problem. I watched the documentary and thought, I love Jason Tatum. This is great. Like, he's just a good dude who's focused on basketball and wants to be a good dad and a good son. And there are two people in that documentary who convinced me through what they presented in the documentary or the docuseries or whatever you want to call it. There are two people who present such a good example for kids that they got me to overlook, some of the foul language and let my 10-year-old son watch it. And that was Jason Tatum and LeBron James.
Yeah.
And the problem I have with Jason Tatum, the narrative that he's not cool enough, is what's the difference between LeBron James and Jason Tatum, personality-wise?
Well, I think you also got to remember that LeBron's stardom took a stratospheric leap when he left for Miami. Like, he was a major, I'm not saying he wasn't already hyped up as the next greatest thing, but he took over the sports world completely when they left for Miami. And the thing that they immediately happened is try to make him to a villain, because before then, and even honestly through that entire experiment, I never understood why people were mad at a man for wanting to leave Cleveland for Miami. Like, who else?
Yeah, I think the decision was a bad media decision.
But it was relatively minor.
I agree. I mean, in terms of transgressions.
Yeah.
I struggle to call this a transgression.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Would I have made a TV show saying I was leaving? No, but it wasn't like he insulted Cleveland in the TV show.
You say you wouldn't.
Yeah.
But if there's an agent or someone talking to you saying this is how much money's involved with this TV show, I might very damn well.
Put those cameras in my house. But I think he was too perfect before then. He was too perfect, and that allowed people to make him into a villain, and then that allowed him to flesh out his character. One of the things that has happened with this new era of NBA stars is they are so media trained that they're kind of boring. And if you go back to the 90s, the 90s, the 80s especially, they were not media trained at all. And a lot of them would flame out. But they had Bird had character, Magic had character, Jordan had character, Allen Iverson, character for days. And you got to see them as full individuals. You got to see the warts, you got to see the good parts, you got to see that you got to see their behavior. You just go watch an '80s playoff game, and you'll get to see a random sideline interview, because there'll be the NBA players will be there, and you'll get to see them saying things that would be wildly crazy, and I think that allows the fan to connect a lot more easily. Jason Tatum is he has put a step wrong publicly at any point in time.
Well, there's the story Kendrick Perkins told about when he played AAU basketball with LeBron, and I think he said they went to New York for a game, and he said, we were all excited about getting out there and going and seeing the sights and all this stuff when we weren't playing. A lot of us hadn't been to New York, and he was like, LeBron's not any different. He comes from the same kind of background we come from.
Yeah.
And we get there and we're eating McDonald's. This guy's got his lunch packed. and he's eating like apple slices and
Yeah.
like chicken and stuff like this. And he said, like, when we were going to see the Empire State Building, LeBron was like, "I can't come. I'm going to media training."
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
yeah, you're talking about a high school kid, you know. And I'd be willing to bet you that Jason Tatum had some similar experiences
Yes, absolutely.
as a young adult. And I do agree with you that you have a more polished professional.
And yeah, and that's
But
good. But I do think the NBA is missing characters. I do
no,
think that.
I'm not
Yeah.
arguing with you about it.
Yeah.
I'm saying I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying that, like, you know, as I sit here and look, like right in front of me, there's a picture of my son on my desk, and I'm sitting here thinking, though, like, do I want my son emulating Jason Tatum or Anthony Edwards? And this isn't a slight at Anthony Edwards. It's an applause of Jason Tatum.
Yeah.
I want my son to be exposed to Jason Tatum, his work ethic, his
Yeah.
character, his values, all of those things. But I fully understand why my son is just naturally drawn to LaMelo Ball.
Yes.
You know,
Yes. The most unserious basketball player known to man.
Yeah. Who is another one that, if he ever became serious, would quickly be vaulted up into that conversation you and I talked about earlier because of his appeal to young people. The final name in the longest podcast episode I think we've ever recorded is Wemby.
That's saying something.
Oh, about us. Yeah. We leave no stone unturned. If you ever see that if you ever look at a podcast episode, you read down the description and it says we're discussing something in detail. Understand that, like, most podcasts will give as much time to a topic that we just consider like an opening quip or something that we just like had minor thoughts about. When we say we're discussing some shit in detail, this is like a conference. So can Wemby, and I think there are a couple other points about Ant, Zion, and Ja that are instructive, because those are all guys who could have been face of the league. And so in looking at them, they tell you some of the things that people are looking for in face of the league. I think that we agree that being American at least impacts it, even if it's not prohibitive. I think we
100%.
both agree that style of play is a part of it.
Yes.
All three of those guys have a particular style of play. I think we agree that personality and charisma is part of it. I think that Wemby's style of play is perfectly in line with what you would have to do.
Yes.
We're saying being American helps, but it's not necessarily prohibitive. I would, if you're international, it's not necessarily prohibitive. I would raise this question: do you think that being French is prohibitive? And maybe looking at Rudy Gobert might be somewhat instructive about that. And then
more of a Rudy Gobert problem than a French problem.
Hey, look, man, I'm just asking questions. But I actually think with Wemby, the French thing is international and French thing is a legitimate conversation. I actually think the thing with him that could end up being more problematic with it, because I actually think he has the personality.
Yeah.
I think it's relatability. Like, I think kids look at.
I'm relating with a 7'6" person.
Yeah, I think kids look at Zion, Ja, and Anthony Edwards and think that could be me. I think they look at Wemby and think it in no shape, way, form, or fashion ever could this be me.
I think so. Yes, that is a thing that has held back big men throughout history, even some of the most dominant ones, including Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, from truly being the face of the leagues. But we have seen big men, including big men who, like Shaq, are completely.
Shaq's a great example.
Who are completely different than like any. No one can aspire to be Shaq and be like that. But connect.
When you talk about personalities in NBA history, you would be hard pressed to find a bigger personality than Shaq.
Yes, and having a big personality also allows like Barkley and Shaq will tell you this. It allows you to smooth your rough edges, and because both of them like have a lot of rough edges. If you just want to follow any discussions about their careers and some of their antics.
I mean, hell, you could just watch NBA on TNT Tuesday night and
yeah,
watch them smooth over the rough edges.
yeah. But I think the thing about Wemby is one, he clearly understands that that you need to have a personality, and that you need to let it show through, and he is intensely media trained, but he also understands like he has a personality, and he like the playing chess in the park, the speaking like a supervillain from a movie constantly about you know I think about what was his comment after the Olympics, it's like I
I
pity
fear
my
for the
opponent.
rest of the NBA or
Yeah,
something.
I pity the rest of the NBA for I will be stronger. This will be the weakest I've ever been.
Sound like Joe Mazzulla wrote something on a post-it note and handed it to
Yeah,
him and said, "Just say this."
yeah, yeah, and his he showboats a little bit in games. He talks trash. There was a moment in the game with the first game against the Nuggets where he was talking trash to Russell Westbrook, and Westbrook was clearly having a great time with it. Like I think he has the potential, and I think he does things that are truly jaw dropping to an extent where people are going to be like, "Holy shit!" Like I do think there's like there in a good Wemby game, there are at least two or three holy shit moments every game where it's like, "What the hell just happened?" And they happen. And the thing that makes him so remarkable is he'll do like a holy shit 3-pointer, and then he'll dunk from like from like outside the restricted area without just jumping vertically. Like 2 plays later, and that's the part I think is going to make Baltimore. I think he is going to be the face of the league. I truly do believe that within the next couple of years. Um, and I think that the league is finally starting to realize that, and then I think they realized they had something with him from the get go. But I think he was held back last year by how dysfunctional the Spurs team was. But you're seeing this year the excitement he's generating. You saw that with the ratings he got in the 12 p.m. slot on New Year's Day. They were double. They were double what the ratings were for the slot afterwards with Luka Doncic and the Timberwolves. Even though that's a better game objectively, I think that there is excitement and interest that he's generating, and I do think that he is going to be. He is the heir apparent to LeBron. I would say.
Yeah, I think that there's zero doubt that Wemby is like a floor for Wemby is he will be an international face of the league.
Yeah.
He's already sort of on the bottom end of that like Luka, Jokic, Giannis tier
Yes.
with international superstardom. I'm a little more skeptical about young people embracing Wemby in that way. I think they're going. I think they're going to like him. And look, I'm saying this, trying to be someone who it's kind of like the Tatum thing. Like if you just called me and you were like, "Hey, we're looking for an American face of the league for the NBA. Who do you want us to go with?" I just would have been like Tatum. Like I don't understand what the holdup
Yes.
is. But like when I go to like a lot of my son's basketball games, like none of these kids are really interested in Wemby. Like they're and quite frankly, I think a part of it is, traditionally it's been guards,
Yes.
but I don't think it's guards per se. I don't think it's about anything to do with the position of guard. I think it's relatability. I think it's what young people see when they look at a guard, which is someone more reasonably sized that they can identify with.
Yes.
I think that when you look at Shaq's career, Shaq was always a major superstar. In fact, I'm bigger than your average person, but Shaq was a guy that I identified with, like, because he was at LSU.
Yeah.
So I watched Shaq growing up, like, loved him. Was like, as soon as he entered the league, I was saving my money, going and buying the rookie cards, the Magic jersey. I was all about it. Um, Loved him when he was paired with Penny. Like it was just, I was there for it. Hated Charles Barkley after he got in that fight with Barkley. Like, and so like, and like I like if that fight was on a Monday and you'd have asked me on Sunday, I'd have been like, love Charles Barkley. Monday, that bastard can burn in hell. Like that was kind of how I felt about Charles Barkley. That's how much I love Shaq. But like, Shaq was never face of the league. Like he was like, it was Jordan and then Kobe. And there's a little Bardo period before Cody really assumes it, where I think that your real front runner for it in that time frame is Allen Iverson.
Yes, I agree with that.
And I think it just has so much to do with the fans' ability to identify personally with that player, and to a certain extent imagine them accomplishing such feats, particularly with young people. And I think that you're 100% right about Wemby when you watch him and you say he does the things where you're just like oohing and ahhing at it. But I think that these are things that you ooh and ah more in the sense of like, wow, holy shit, I could never do that.
Yeah.
Like, rather than, and it's crazy because, once again,
It's even more than that. I don't think I've ever seen another human being do
yeah,
that before.
100%. I don't know that another human being could do that.
Yes.
Like, yeah, like 100%. And it's odd because, I say I'm basing a lot of this off of being around a lot of youth basketball and seeing how kids relate to these players. And quite frankly, like, much to my dismay, a player like LaMelo has a lot more traction in that space than Wemby does. But it's bizarre. Steph clearly has more traction in that space than anyone. And it's sort of like Ja Morant's another one, where it's sort of like, okay, guys, I understand you look at him and you feel like you can relate to them to more, but let me be the first, particularly as your coach, to reassure you, you cannot shoot a 30-foot shot off of the dribble, so quit trying.
I have control over the situation.
Yeah. We're going to change the shot diets around here a little bit because we're relating too much to certain NBA stars. But if Wemby became the face of the league, I wouldn't be altogether shocked. I just think that ends up being the stumbling block to that. But I think he's so intriguing and so mesmerizing that you do kind of get him into that Shaq space. And I think for most people, that's what Shaq was. He broke the goal, and you're like, I've never seen anybody do anything like that. You know what I mean? Like, it was mesmerizing, and you were oohing and ahhing at it, but it was like, dude, I remember when I was a kid, we went across the street, we were playing at my neighbor's house, and I dunked on their goal. And it was like one of those ones where you just got the metal pole with the fiberglass backboard on it, the white fiberglass backboard. And when I dunked, I always tried to throw my legs up like Shaq did.
Yeah.
And I ripped the backboard off, the rim off of the backboard, and I fell and hit my head on the concrete.
Ooh, shit.
And like to this day, still have a ringing in my ear that goes back to that day. I started having a ringing in my ear after I hit my head that day, and I still have it. I don't know why. And maybe some audiologist is like, "You idiot! That has nothing to do with anything. There's no way that permanently." But I ran across the street. It was like I dunked it, fell, hit my head on the concrete, popped up off the ground as though the ground was a trampoline, and then just immediately sprinted across the street crying. Yeah. Ran in the house, told my dad what happened, and simultaneously I'm crying and think that I've busted the back of my head wide open and I'm gonna die. But I'm also bragging about I did it just like Shaq. I broke the rim just like Shaq. One of the proudest moments of my young life, and so like and like to me that's the relatability thing. Like I was bigger, I was able to do some of that kind of stuff, and like felt like I could relate to it.
Yeah.
But then like I think most people are looking more at that just smaller frame and being able to identify with it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that plays a big role. I think it plays a big role. I think that we'll have to see Wemby's still a new commodity. He didn't get a lot of exposure last year. The Spurs were so bad. I think, will a playoff run help? Will that, will that, Michael Jordan's big coming out moment was his 61-point game in the playoffs in the Celtics. That is, that's sort of the official beginning of Michael Jordan. Maybe that helps. But I do think you're 100% correct. Kids, especially at that age, want a player they can relate to. And I think that Wemby, I mean, like they nicknamed him the Alien, and I think that's a great
Yeah.
nickname. I think it's a great nickname, but it also shows
Symbolizes the problem.
the problem that you're going to face. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree with you completely about that. I mean, just closing thoughts. Like, is there anybody like, I've seen people throw Cooper Flagg's name as someone that feels like incredibly premature in my mind. Is
Let's
there,
get to the NBA first.
yeah. Like, is there anyone that you think should be on the radar as potentially being able to step into this space, or do you think, if the Wemby thing doesn't work in terms of like a true face of the league in America, does the NBA, continue to have a superstar problem? Does that superstar problem compound when LeBron and Steph goes away, or does LeBron and Steph going away enable, that attention to consolidate around someone else?
Well, one, they're not going away anytime soon. Unfortunately, I mean, like, fortunately or unfortunately, I think that you have at least one more year with both, probably two in case of Steph, maybe one more with LeBron. But I don't think that. I know they had that interview where they're both talking about how they think about retiring every day, but um, I don't get the sense that either of them is moving towards doing that necessarily next year. I think you probably have one or two more years. I think that the the face of the league discussion, that next person is not likely to emerge and before then. I do think that the most likely outcome right now is that you have this draft class with Flag, and then you have AJ DeBansa coming in next one, and it seems like likely to me that um, one of those two is as much likely to be on the face of the league, or it's also a possibility that you have dual faces of the league. One of the things that has happened before is that you have players, a rivalry emerges, and that becomes the defining narrative of
I
it.
think you could also end up with, as a substitute for face of the league for quite a few years in the absence of LeBron and Steph, I think you're going to potentially see a tripartite rivalry um, between Wemby, Steph. Jesus Christ, it is too late. Wemby, Luka, and Shai.
I think that's where the NBA is heading right now.
I think like these guys basically all share like an interstate corridor, sort of in the same region, and I think you're going to see a major rivalry emerge between those three. And I think that those rivalries will be what sustains the league in the absence of um, a face that
And to
can
be fair, and
claim
to
that
be
mantle.
clear, the NBA has thrived in that
Yeah,
type of era.
yeah, no,
I
I
mean, the
agree.
most watched basketball game of all time is the college game between Magic and Larry Bird.
Yeah. Oh, and I also think another really good thing for the NBA could end up being, I actually think the Knicks are really good. I think they're going to get better. I
Yes.
think if they can bring back Mitchell Robinson and have a rim protector, I would favor Boston in that series. But I really do feel like having New York and Boston both be really good at basketball and have competitive 7-game playoff series is going to be really good for the NBA.
I think that the NBA, for a lot of reasons, is heading into a healthy place. And I think that we are I think part of the malaise that we have right now is that we are in an era that historically the LeBrons and the Currys have already left the scene. And that we would be seeing right now is the new star, like we would be finding out who the new stars are. And because they haven't left the scene, you kind of have these like, well, what's going on? Like, and like they're still the biggest fish in the pond. Because the thing that needs to be remembered about the conversation about best player in the league, I mean, the face of the league is it's not the best player in the league.
Yeah.
It's those are separate things. They can be the same thing with Jordan, like for Jordan, for example, or LeBron, but they're not always the same. They're not always the same thing.
No, I agree.
So, you have when you have this sort of when they aren't the same thing, it can create tension, especially if the team the best player is playing on is not that good and not competing for the highest goals. And so I think that we're seeing everything sort of play out, but I do think that we are heading into an era of rivalry where you have that. I would even throw Tatum into that group. And and I think that is really healthy for the league. I think that the one worry I would have is that is all three of those teams are Western Conference teams. So, that leads to.
Well, and I would actually throw a fourth rivalry in there that would also be a Western Conference rivalry based on what I saw last week, which is Jokic and Wemby for a few years.
Yes.
I
Fantastic
think
2 games, by the way.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I agree. But I think like the
You
level
had to
of
deal with
play.
me. You had to deal with me raging in the kind reading your text messages. Yeah.
I've learned with the Wemby rants, like I just give you time. But like I
my
mean,
feelings out. Yeah.
between the two of those guys, they're like throwing out like 140 points in 2 games with like 70 rebounds or some crazy shit. Like it was insane. But I think that I agree with you. I think that the NBA is heading in a healthy direction. Like to end it on a positive note, I would say, like, quite honestly, I don't think the ship has completely sailed on the 3 guys we mentioned earlier as being faces of the league.
Absolutely not.
I'm certainly not willing to write off Anthony Edwards because he's had a rough start with trying to figure out like how to play next to a difficult player in a relatively short period of time. I think it's a little quick to start selling your Anthony Edwards stock because there's a long
Anthony Edwards yet.
yeah. Well, there's no, I don't, and there's a long history of like moves like that just taking some while to pan out. I'm beyond and always was beyond the idea that it was going to pan out in terms of the Wolves being contenders as a result of that move. But I think Anthony Edwards can certainly rebound. John Morant can absolutely rebound, long as he can just, stay on the court and, avoid injury and avoid whatever the hell it is he does on Instagram. And look, man, if Zion gets healthy, I think it'll be in a different place. But if Zion gets healthy, if he ends up in Miami, San Antonio, Golden State, wherever the hell he ends up going, if he's healthy there, he can absolutely vault right back to the top of that conversation. But I think what you're looking at right now is we're moving into a time where it's going to be defined more by rivalries.
Yes.
New York, Boston, Wemby versus Jokic, Luka versus Shai, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good place for us to end. It was a good conversation. Don't forget to subscribe to this video on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. We really enjoy the pickup and the audience we've gotten and all the traction we're getting on YouTube. So we really appreciate it if you share our content with your friends and family, share it on your social media feeds. We look forward to the continued conversation.
Thanks, y'all.